Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I am John DeLynn. It is Jesus's birthday, the date the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in a previous incarnation was founded, April 6th. It's 2023, and today we are here to do a 2023, April 2023 General Conference review, something that we hope will become more and more of a tradition here on Mormon Stories podcast. And joining us from across the pond as the producer and the coordinator for this episode is none other than Nemo the Mormon from the Nemo the Mormon YouTube channel. Hey, Nemo, how's it going?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Thanks for what time is it there? Tell us what time it is there.
It is what time is it? My goodness, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Why in the world did you schedule this at 1 a.m. in the morning, Nemo? What do you think?
Well, because Sam wasn't available earlier in the day, and
oh my God, I'm so sorry.
you know, and she's not around tomorrow, so I was like, well, it's got to happen. So it's basically all Sam's fault.
All right, Sam, how do you feel about that?
And my camping trip tomorrow got cancelled, so
Oh,
I
no.
could.
Oh,
I'm so
my
sorry.
All right, well, yeah, so that's a way to introduce Samantha Shelley from Zelf on the Shelf.
That's a heavy burden to be
and from
holding.
Samantha Shelley Coaching. What's your website, your coaching website again, Samantha?
It's SamanthaShelleyCoaching.com.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us again. It's so good to have you back. And also joining us today is the Gerardo Simano. Hey, Gerardo.
Hey, John.
How's it going?
Hi, Samantha. Nemo. Good. Doing good.
How excited are you for this general conference? Pretty excited?
Yeah, 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
All right. Well, Nemo, you produced this one, so let's give you a chance to kind of introduce it in your own way.
Yeah, sure. I clearly, for those that don't know, I do a series of halftime shows during the conference weekend. So after every session, 15 minutes after, I will give you a breakdown of exactly what happened. So I watched all 10 hours of conference and did about 5 hours worth of live streaming that weekend, and I just can't get enough of conference. So I said to John, please, can we do a roundup show so that those that don't want to watch all 5 hours of what I did can watch a couple of hours of this and know everything that went on. So we're not going to be going through every single talk. There will be a list. We'll go through a slide that will have a list of everyone that spoke, who said the prayers, and what happened that session. But I will have highlighted the talks that are pertinent. We've got some clips from those talks. We'll play them. We'll talk about them. And in Nemo fashion, we'll do this as quick as we can because I want to go to bed.
All right.
Yes.
We'll give a shout out to Maven that's moderating the comments. We're live streaming both to YouTube and Facebook. Thanks to everyone who's joining us on the live stream. We welcome your comments. We'll do our best to incorporate some of your comments, and we always appreciate you subscribing to Mormon Stories Podcast, Zelf on the Shelf, and Nemo the Mormon. We always love your subscriptions, and again, if you can donate through the Super Chat feature on YouTube, if you value this content, or through the stars feature on Facebook, we always appreciate it. All right. So, Nemo, where should we begin?
Well, I think we need to start with the first slide and the conspicuous absence of a certain apostle, Mr. Jeffrey R. Holland, who, breaking news today, it seems like he had COVID and that's why he wasn't there, but he's also got a problem with his kidneys and he's been excused from church duties for a couple of months, which means conveniently he's not going to have to go to SUU. And I think that's the first thing we should talk about, because the protesters seem to have won through his ill health.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, we wish him sincere recovery, and we want to show him love and respect, and we don't wish ill health on anyone. So that's the first thing I think we should all say is get well soon, Jeffrey R. Holland, and obviously his decision and the church's decision to push Southern Utah University to allow him to speak at the graduation ceremony caused all sorts of disruptions in the SUU LGBTQ community and in the broader community. And then SUU, after all the protests, we did an episode on this. There was a huge community backlash, and SUU decided to stay and to keep him as a commencement speaker. And we wondered whether in some way, but there would be a way for SUU to affirm him as a speaker, but for also him to be able to back out and to save face. We assume he's just genuinely sick. But what do you think, Gerardo? You were a part of that episode.
Yeah, just interesting that it's exactly 2 months his recovery. Well, they're saying at least 2 months, and that happens to be when the commencement ceremony is supposed to happen. But then at the same time, they're mentioning dialysis and other kinds of health complications, which is kind of sad. And who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe God didn't want him to be at SUU.
Yeah, at least the Mormon Stories God intervened. But sincere condolences to the Holland family. Get well soon. And honestly, congratulations to the SUU community. I think even the church feels like this is the best outcome. Do you think, Samantha, what do you think? Is that stretching it?
Does seem like a bit of a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Bullets have been dodged.
Mhm.
Bullets have been dodged. Let's use the passive voice. Okay, Nemo. So Elder Holland was also not at General Conference, and he made the comment, it's the first time, I think, in his apostleship that he hasn't attended General Conference.
And he came out on Instagram and said, he's really happy that he actually gets to like chill out and watch conference with his wife and relieve some of the pressure. Which that combined with the fact that we don't have this on the slides, but there was an article beforehand in LDS Living of like how to take care of yourself psychologically while watching conference. So it's like it's telling that an apostle is coming out and saying, oh well, we have, it's nice for me not to have to be there. If he's finding it stressful and the entire weekend is essentially about him, imagine how the members could feel.
Yeah, good point, Nemo.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, we can crack on with the next slide. So Saturday morning session, we got opening prayers, the usual stuff, and all the talks were fairly interesting. But Gerrit W. Gong is the first one I want to talk about, as well as Alan D. Haynie. Alan D. Haynie became meme-worthy over the weekend. A lot of people are using some of his logic to justify things. But if we go to the next slide, we'll start with Gong, and I want to get everyone's reactions to this video.
Do you want to set this up first? Is there anything you want to tell people?
Not particularly.
Play it?
It speaks for itself.
All right. This is Gerrit Gong at the April 2023 General Conference session.
A convert was ministered to by personal example. As a young man, he said he spent his days lounging at the beach. One day he said, I saw an attractive girl in a modest swimsuit. Amazed, he went to ask why such an attractive girl would wear such a modest swimsuit. She was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and asked with a smile, would you like to come to church Sunday? He said yes.
Can we get the camera on Sam, please?
Yeah, Sam. Sam gets to comment
So
first.
I'm hearing a sexual harassment anecdote that the woman did not feel compelled to call out, understandable perhaps, and just immediately turned it into a conversion opportunity.
So
Imagine going up to it. Sorry, but like that story is why I hate being in any kind of swimsuit in public, because just the fact that he's like scanning the modesty level of women's bathing suits and then went up to one and said, why are you dressed so modestly when you're so hot? Oh my God, nightmare.
Why are you dressed so modestly when you're so hot? That is the essence of what he said.
It's literally sexual harassment at the beach, and this is being told as a wonderful
Faith
little
affirming
tale.
Story. So in the spirit of constructiveness, Samantha, if you were to pull Elder Gong aside and say, Elder Gong, let me explain to you in human terms why that was cringeworthy and non-helpful, what would you say to him?
I'd say, hun, girl boss, let's talk. First of all, modesty is completely arbitrary. What is modest to you in this culture is incredibly scandalous in another. And what we view as sexual about women's bodies is culturally conditioned. And so all you're doing is just reinforcing the idea that a woman's body is inherently sexual, and if it's on display a certain amount, that she is in some way inviting being sexualized. This woman was sexualized in her modest bathing suit, so doesn't really seem to be helping. But yeah, just really hate that story.
Yeah, just men don't comment on women's appearances.
Just never bring it up.
Yeah,
maybe just look away. Maybe don't go to the beach. If that's something you're kind of wrestling with.
So good. Gerardo, anything you want to
add? So on the last review that we did of General Conference, it was when they announced the last year For the Strength of Youth, the new pamphlet. I think one of the things that we talked about was that there were a lot of progressive members who were really happy about these new improvements to the pamphlet. He doesn't give specifics as to what kind of clothes women should wear or men should wear. It's just very generalized and basically says make your own decisions as to how you want to respect your body. And one of the comments that I made, and I think others made on the panel, was that they were making this improvement, but it was going to take years or decades for that message to actually resonate with the older generations in the church. And I think Elder Gong is just displaying that exact sentiment here in this next general conference, where he's bringing this back into the rhetoric when supposedly we had given a step ahead.
Yeah.
It's a man sharing another man's story about his opinion on a woman's body. Like this, just think about that chain. It's so grim. And then also this woman who's been sexually harassed at the beach, it's being the fact that she turned around and invited a pervert to come to church with her is being heralded. I wouldn't want that man coming to my church. Hate it.
Don't we love having Samantha Shelley on Mormon Stories podcast?
You love it till you don't, John.
There's a reason I wanted Sam on this episode, and it's because I knew we were playing this clip. I was like, this is gonna make waves.
Yeah,
All right,
ridiculous.
All right, Nemo. Well, that's
Sounds great.
that's a good clip to start with.
Yeah, I think that, and in fact, Gerardo's comment helps us segue onto the next clip, which is excellent. Because well, that's an example of Gong not getting the memo, right?
Yeah.
And this is another memo that he didn't get. So Gong clearly didn't listen to the safeguarding training that the church has put out, because we're going to play 2 videos in a row. One of him talking about how ministering should happen, and then another from the church's safeguarding video to show why he's wrong.
Okay, let's roll
The tape.
Higher and holier ministering comes when we pray for the pure love of Christ and follow the Spirit. It also comes as elders quorum and Relief Society presidencies, under the bishop's direction, oversee ministering efforts, including assigning ministering companionships. Please give our young men and young women needed opportunity to accompany and be mentored by experienced ministering brothers and sisters. And please let our young rising generation inspire ministering brother and sister companions.
So he's encouraging the young people to be paired with experienced ministering companions, and he doesn't specify that should be their parents. He just says he wants them with experienced ministering companions, and if you play the next video, we'll see why that's problematic.
All right, here we go.
At a primary activity, Sister Jackson notices another leader asking Jasmine, an 11-year-old girl, to get into her car. The leader explains that she needs help to retrieve some supplies and will only be gone for a few minutes. What should Sister Jackson do?
And then this is from the training, so we'll see some options selected and see what happens when the church sees you put the wrong one. Says you remind the leader that they should be more than one person with the youth, and then the correct answer is remind them they should always avoid one-on-one situations with the youth. So why is Elder Gong encouraging teenagers, young rising generation ministers, 14s and over, to be paired with potentially just senior members of the ward, more experienced ministers in the ward, ending up in their car, going on home visits, going into other people's homes? The safeguarding optics on this are terrible, and in contradiction to the church's own safeguarding training. Thoughts?
Wow.
Is he necessarily advocating for them, traveling there in a one-on-one situation together?
Well, it's companionships, right? So there's usually only 2 people in those companionships, and like I said, it could be with their parents, but he's not making that clear enough, certainly. To my mind.
And for those who don't have the Mormon context, just like the Catholic Church and the movie Spotlight illustrated, many Christian churches in the United States and abroad have a real problem with the abuse of children and with the abuse of youth and even of young adults. Mm-hmm. And the Mormon Church is no exception to that. And as the Associated Press has highlighted recently, and also as the Boy Scouts of America lawsuit also has highlighted, the Mormon Church has a massive, massive history of abuse of children and youth, and of cover-ups of abuse of children and youth. And that's why, is that kind of what you're getting at, Nemo?
Well, just that, yeah, the church has got a problem with safeguarding. They refuse to do background checks here in the UK, even though they're quite simply obtained. They've said to a national government inquiry here in the UK that we don't do them because we have our own system of checks and balances, which, when you look into that, just are completely inadequate. So the idea then that you are suggesting in any way that youth can end up with older members of the ward that aren't their parents, who haven't been background checked in a one-on-one situation in a car on their way to a ministering appointment, just, that's alarm bells to me from a safeguarding perspective.
Yeah. Sam, Gerardo, anything you want to add?
Well, I had two thoughts. One, it seems like Elder Gong hasn't taken the training and he doesn't know about it. And then like you said, Nemo, it just shows that these decisions to improve the church's PR, to add like this type of training or to improve the pamphlet of For Strength of Youth is not resonating with the higher top leadership of the church, and is not coming from the top down. But these decisions to look more progressive are probably coming from bottom up, and then they're not getting the memo.
Yeah.
And Gong's not talking about just doing like phone calls here either. He said earlier in this talk that we should be doing more. You should be going out to homes more. You should be seeing people in their houses more. Like, he was basically trying to push back to the old home teaching, visiting teaching narrative, because the people had kind of slacked off when ministering came out, because they were actively told that, you can use different forms of contact to count as serving with others. But then Gong's come out and kind of pushed back against that now, and is saying, no, you need to get out and more formally visit people again. So that also plays into it.
Got it.
So it just seems like a really boring general conference talk that is completely missing the mark. I'm like, ministering is not going to be the thing that gets people staying in the church. And just the bureaucracy of like the whole thing, and just just all the jargon and the...
So interesting that you mentioned that, Samantha. This may be relevant to later parts of your presentation or of this discussion today, Nemo. But I was talking to a very close family member who's an Orthodox believing Mormon, and she said to me, this is the first time in the history of her life, and she's in her 60s. She's been an Orthodox believing Mormon for over 60 years. She says this is the first time she's ever been flat out bored at a general conference.
I saw that a lot on the LDS subreddit. A lot of people just saying they just found it really boring and unfulfilling, and they obviously felt shame about that. And
that's the trap. That's the double bind the church is in. If they want to keep it engaging and interesting, they're going to be talking about Joseph Smith. They're going to be talking about distinctive Mormon theology. They're going to be doing LGBT, anti-LGBT rhetoric. They're going to be polarizing, politically or socially.
Other churches.
Condemning other churches. That's what they have to do to keep members engaged and excited and motivated.
But as we know from Stephen Hassan, the purpose of it, or like the way that general conference realistically makes the biggest impact, is through the hypnotic effect that it has. Like, you see the photos of people at conference all slumped over in their seats, listening to these like dreary monotone voices. I mean, that is having like a belief reinforcing effect. So I suppose it's still functioning as designed in that way.
But look, the reality is it's probably one of the most boring conferences in memory.
And it's always been boring, to be honest. Even if you're someone who aggressively tried to extract meaning from it, which I was, and was, taking notes and brutal. Just pulling whatever you could. Still boring then.
So to say it's the most boring ever is really saying
quite
something,
the feat,
right?
Yeah.
Right. But then if and that's the double bind, because if they just focus on Jesus, if they stay away from controversy, which we all want them to do, like, don't we all want them to just focus on love and peace and to stay away from polarizing stuff? Then they bore everybody and make people want to go become snufferites. Anyway, Nemo, back to you.
It's almost like there's not enough to say on that to fill 10 hours of people's time.
Yeah.
or 9 hours.
They don't really have any like needle moving ideas about how to be kind or expand your circle of compassion. It's just kind of like say the platitude so then we can get the brownie points for it. Peace prize, please. We already paid for one of those.
We'll get to that. Don't you worry. We'll get to here's my talk to prove I earned this peace prize that I paid for. That's right near the end. But this guy Haynie, that we're going to come to next, he came out with reducing the canon of scripture that you can look at. But first, he wants to talk about, you know, that game that we all play. You know the game we play, the debate we're all engaged in of when he's speaking as a prophet and when we can just pick and choose what we want to listen to. You know, we were all playing that game, right? Yeah, this guy reckons so. Let's play the clip.
All right, let's play the clip.
Knowing by revelation that there's a living prophet on the earth changes everything. It causes one to be uninterested in the debate about when is a prophet speaking as a prophet, or whether one is ever justified in selective rejection of prophetic counsel.
Ooh.
Selective rejection of prophetic counsel is what he said. Yeah.
Okay, Nemo, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, where to start? Because, you know, it's gonna get worse. But he's essentially saying that, well, if you accept that there's a living prophet, then you don't need to worry about when he's speaking as a prophet and when he's not, because you should just listen to all of it. That idea of selective rejection of prophetic counsel, he's using pejorative language, he's using very negative language to describe someone that doesn't just listen to all of it. So it's very clear from what he's saying that he wants people to listen to everything the prophet says. You shouldn't be playing the game of when does he speak as a man, when does he speak as a prophet, which becomes problematic.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on, please.
What Mormon apologetics hinge on is being able to say he was speaking as a man, not a prophet. So
yeah. So this guy is not popular with Scott Gordon at FAIR. You know, the Church Apologist Institution, FAIR Mormon, they are not happy with this guy because, like you said, they rely on being able to play the game of, well, he was only speaking as a man. And in order to deal with that, we'll use the next clip, and then we can have a broader discussion about this.
So the key is to follow the living prophet. Brothers and sisters, unlike vintage comic books and classic cars, prophetic teachings do not become more valuable with age. That is why we should not seek to use the words of past prophets to dismiss the teachings of living prophets.
I want to get Gerardo in here. Gerardo, what do you think?
Well, we don't need to go that much back. We can use their same words, you know, from 2015 and then from 2019 and see that they're saying different things, the same prophet. But
for new people who are new to Mormon stories or have never been Mormons, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so we have prophets like Russell Nelson, Dallin H. Oaks, who put policies that they say are revelations, and then 3 years later change it, you know, like the November 15 policy,
the exclusion policy.
Yeah, the exclusion policy targeting LGBT people in the church, and then reversing it and completely removing it 3 years later. But yeah, what he's saying is really interesting, because then isn't a prophet supposed to tell us about what's going to happen in the future? So if their words become less valuable over time, then how can we rely on them to tell us what's going to happen later?
It's literally the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
And whether it's the 2015 November exclusion policy that got rescinded, whether it's the ban for, you know, people of African descent from holding the priesthood or attending the temple, whether it's polygamy that was rescinded, you know, which prophets do we believe? And what this reminds me of is the 14 fundamentals of following the prophets that I think it was Ezra Taft Benson who came up with. Are we going to talk about that, Nemo?
Well, no, it's not going to come up specifically, but it is absolutely, this is a reproduction of that same sentiment, which is a living prophet is more important than a dead prophet, I think is the phrase.
Living prophets trump dead prophets.
Yep.
But the problem with that is, isn't the whole point is that God is unchanging, God's doctrine is eternal, and that prophets shouldn't be changing, you know, doctrines or policies,
ordinances,
temple ordinances, depending on what civil rights movement is happening at the time, what the grassroots membership is protesting when Google emerges, whatever it is, that's just not how Revelation's supposed to work.
And they're like they're prophets till they die.
Right.
So there's going to be a dead prophet at some point. So you were meant to just disregard his words. Like loads of people were holding up on the internet. Are my copies of this, like teachings of the president of the church, I've got these. Are they just useless now?
Right.
Do I not need them anymore?
And what I concluded is that, how do you know when a prophet is speaking as a prophet? Their mouth is moving, right? In other words,
to Haynie,
if they're dead, their mouth isn't moving, and what they said doesn't matter. All that matters is what the current breathing, living prophet is saying, and that's a bait and switch. Isn't that a bait and switch?
It's also not acknowledging all the times when a prophet has been like, hey, God just told me this, like straight from him. I'm telling you guys, if this thing ever changes, that's how you'll know the church is in apostasy. Or this thing is an eternal, unchanging, it's not reckoning with any of that. And it's also just once again painting a picture of a God who does not find it in any way valuable for people to have a conscience or even, a connection to the Holy Ghost that's bigger than, let's say the racist shit that prophets were saying. So it's essentially reinforcing that any racist stuff Brigham Young said, for example, what God wanted you to do was bow your head and say yes. So God just wanted sheep. He restored his church just so that he could have people bow their head and say yes, regardless of what messed up stuff was going on.
Samantha's spicy today.
Yeah, we're only half an hour in, please.
Babies, it's your fault if you thought they would appreciate and value.
Nice. That will make a TikTok out of that one. Okay. All right. Nemo.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing as well is like you take your quad here, and this is, I'm pretty sure, the words of loads of prophets, right? I'm pretty sure even Haynie himself called Jesus Christ a prophet later in his talk. So we're meant to ignore Jesus now because he is a dead prophet.
Yeah, famously dead. So
famously dead.
So we can basically ignore Jesus.
It is his birthday though. So.
It is. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe we need to be like affirming Jesus on his birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, building him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. I don't know about you guys.
That's
it's
good.
Pretty tragic.
That's good.
Yeah.
Cool. The next clip, the next slide, please.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
All right, there we go.
Challenge through this. So the Saturday afternoon session, typically when we get the sustaining of church officers and the audit, and nothing else here was worth looking at apart from the audit and the sustaining of church officers.
Okay,
because boy, oh boy,
so wait,
did we get some news?
Uchtdorf's talk wasn't super noteworthy.
He was a cuddly teddy bear.
Okay,
right?
Really quick, Samantha, what'd you like about Uchtdorf or think about Uchtdorf?
Well, he gave this talk about how, you need to, the metaphor was like children are like plants and you need to give them access to like the right soil, blah, 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 blah. So it was all like, just sort of like flowery, nice sounding things. But to me, the issue with that is this is a high control group that fundamentally misunderstands what children need to thrive and actively like perpetuates systems that are harmful to children. So it just feels like a classic example of you can have the best intentions in the world, but if you have a flawed worldview or, like ineffective, even harmful ideas about what healthy child development looks like, for example, it doesn't matter. You can give the most poetic talk in the world, Uchtdorf's likable and everything, but it just really is meaningless because what people watching that talk think it means to, give a child the right ingredients to thrive is just quite inaccurate.
But Sam, he did give us a great quote. He said, daily bread is best prepared and served at home.
Makes you think.
You know what I mean?
You forgot to mention that Uchtdorf is hot, Samantha.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to objectify right now, but I'm glad that you brought it up.
Okay, Nemo, back to you. Sorry.
A lot of thirst for Uchtdorf online and everywhere else.
I thought the elephant in the room added to the vibe of this podcast.
So, okay. Let's start with the sustaining of church officers. I've done a little edit of our good friend Brian Pugh into the sustaining of church officers because, I want everyone to just experience a sliver of the boredom that is General Conference. So we're going to watch the sustaining of church officers, but interspersed with a little bit of spiciness. Let's
Nemo,
roll the
really
tape.
quickly explain to our Never Mormons what sustaining means in a Mormon context.
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
Depends if your bishop wants you to get in line or not, because to my bishop it means just please say you sustain them so we stop having these really difficult interviews. But what sustaining is in general is the idea that you will support and uphold the individual in their task within the church. So when they ask for a sustaining vote, it is a vote of loyalty, of fidelity almost to those individuals in their calling. So you're sustaining these men as prophets, seers, and revelators, saying that you believe that that's what they are, and that's what you will uphold them as, and you will support them as such. And you do it on a local level as well for like individual callings. And if you oppose that sustaining, it is because you have information that means that person shouldn't be serving in that calling. You have reason to object to their being in that position. And there is multitude of reasons why the men in the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 shouldn't be in that position.
But I'll just say, in my 45 years as an active believing Mormon or active Mormon, I never saw anyone oppose ever. So it's super rare for anyone to ever oppose, at least historically. In my
it's a big deal.
It's
a big deal.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the sustaining vote is all about loyalty, about fidelity. So you've got this big in-group, out-group behavior going on, where those that are all in the in-group are all showing that they're in the in-group by raising their hand to sustain. And then, you end up in a position where if you're standing out by saying, no, I oppose, that's a problem.
Right. So it's kind of a farce of a democratic process, right?
Oh, yeah. Farcical, for sure.
Okay. Not to be confused with the farcical aquatic ceremony, but that's another movie. Okay. Let's play Elder Oaks. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
It is proposed that we sustain Russell Marion Nelson as prophet, seer, and revelator and president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Dallin Harris Oaks as first counselor in the First Presidency, and Henry Benyon Eyring as second counselor in the First Presidency. Those in favor may manifest it. Those opposed, if any, may manifest it. It is proposed.
Okay, now wait. I'm going to pause it for a second. For those who are just listening and weren't able to see, all they heard was the audio turned weird. You want to just quickly explain what you just showed?
The audio turned weird because a very brave man recorded himself voting opposed in a conference center that seats 22,000 people.
In a red coat, right?
In a red coat, just so that he could stand out. Yeah.
Do we remember his name?
Brian Pugh.
Brian Pugh. Yeah. Shout out to Brian Pugh. He lives in, I think it's Queens, New York.
Wow.
Might be another one of the one of those areas. But anyway, he reached out to me. He's a great guy. We hope to have him on Mormon Stories. But it was a super courageous moment. He videoed himself opposing. Yeah. And that got shared I shared it on Reddit, on Instagram, on YouTube, and it got hundreds of thousands of views, and people saw it as really courageous. Were you going to say anything else about that, Emo?
No. And I was just going to show him doing it each time.
Okay. And I was just going to say, we'll show it again. We'll go ahead and roll it, and then we'll talk a bit more about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go ahead and continue
That's fine. The snooze fest.
Okay.
Of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and M. Russell Ballard as acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Those in favor, please signify. Any opposed, may manifest it. It is proposed that we sustain the following as members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. M. Russell Ballard, Jeffrey R. Holland, Dieter F. Uchtdorf, David A. Bednar, Quentin L. Cook, D. Todd Christofferson, Neil L. Anderson, Ronald A. Rasband, Gary E. Stevenson, Dale G. Renland, Garrett W. Gong, and Ulysses Soares. Those in favor, please manifest it. Any opposed, may so indicate.
There you go.
All right.
So 3
All right,
times.
Nemo. What do you want to say about that, Nemo? And I should say, Nemo, that this sustaining thing or voting opposed is something very personal to you as well,
Yeah.
which is why I wanted to make sure you got included on that sharing. Go ahead and talk about that if you want.
Yeah, voting opposed is very important to me. It's something I've done a lot of. I just shared a short recently, including footage of me where I was singing in the choir on the stand at state conference, and I voted opposed, and where they'd conveniently put me in the choir right behind my state president, so my head just pops up and I do this and then back down again. Go check that out. But yeah, voting opposed is something that's very important to me because I feel like it is a public declaration of your position. In a way that allows others to see that non-conformity is acceptable, because it is asked for. You notice he didn't just start waving his arm around and go, I oppose, I oppose. They asked if anyone opposed, they could make it known. They ask a question, not really for the appearance of democracy, for the appearance of common consent, which is the scriptural principle this is based on, found in Doctrine and Covenants. For the appearance of that, they ask if anyone is opposed, but they don't ever expect anyone to put their hand up. And when you do, it helps show all those around you that there is an option other than non-conformity. And that's why I think it's really important, personally, to me. And I'm really grateful whenever anyone does this and records themselves doing it and shares it, because we know that someone else in that session who was singing in the BYU choir voted opposed as well. We have an eyewitness from within the choir reached out and told me that someone in the choir voted opposed as well. So there was at least 2 people in that conference center of tens of thousands who stood up and went or put their arm up and said, no, I don't agree. And that's a brave move.
Gerardo?
I thought it was interesting that they mentioned the middle names for the first presidency and not the apostles.
Interesting.
Do you have any thoughts?
No, yeah,
on why
I
they would
didn't
do
even
that?
realize that.
Because I've never heard them mention the middle names before on General Conference, and then I noticed that they only did it for the first presidency.
Interesting.
Bonus hero worship.
They've always done it for the first presidency, I think, because I've got in my head an American trying to say Friedrich, which is Dietrich Uchtdorf's middle name. So I've definitely heard them say it for him, but he was on the first presidency in the Monson era.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just them.
Really quickly, going back to Brian Pugh, I just want to say, I thought it was remarkable how respectful he was. He didn't try and shout out or be disruptive. All he did was just elegantly and courageously raise his arm. Did any of you notice the faces of the people around him as he raised his arm?
I swear they were all just trying to act like they did. They all seemed like they didn't even see
They
it.
didn't even look up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people commented that was kind of weird that they didn't even like.
Like, is it threatening to even look over? Because I'd be curious.
Yeah, but they didn't even avert their eyes. So that was interesting.
Also, I know this isn't really what this section is about, but I just felt like all of the men on the stand, I know they're old and stuff, but I just felt like none of them had any life force in them, and they all just looked like completely sapped of any kind of zest. And again, it's fine to be old, and you're not always feeling zesty. I get it, but like just all of them just seemed there wasn't like, I'm thinking of other spiritual leaders that I like. I feel like they generally have kind of a serenity to them, and obviously like looks can be deceiving too. In this, vibe doesn't always say everything, but it's like you didn't really get any kind of sense of, I don't know, anything lovely, any vitality or any serenity.
And that's probably some projection on our part, because I'm sure a bunch of the attendees saw them glowing with goodness.
I thought Neil looked a little bit less gormless than the rest.
Something that did hit me when they pan the camera towards the Quorum of the 12, I just had this thought of like, I don't imagine like Peter, James, and John, and Jesus, like all with very humble clothes.
I know,
and
the
how they were supposed to like
Armani suits. You don't think Jesus
it felt
and Peter...
comical that they were all dressed like that,
and then like sitting on these red chairs, like it's just really striking, because that's who they are supposed to be representing, right? The apostles, the original apostles of Christ.
Yeah, the opulence might even remind us of the Book of Mormon's denunciation of the Catholic Church, or the great and abominable whore of all the earth, with all the fine apparel and the great and spacious building. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's
Who
a little
approved
bit-
velvet chairs? I do think everyone deserves to be comfortable, but it's just not a good look.
Yeah, and the little bowls of sweets next to them as well, or candy, if you will.
They're like Mariah Carey, green M&Ms only.
I wonder what their runners are like when they're at conference. Like, what? One of them's like, no, it must be Evian water. You know, when they've got their foibles.
All right. Well, that's the sustaining portion.
Yeah.
Again, shout out to Brian Pugh. All right.
So I wanted to get Brian in.
Let's make that a tradition. Why don't we? Like, what if every general conference, people that are opposed to what the church leaders are doing take the church seriously in the common consent policies that have been enacted, go to general conference, video themselves raising their arms in defiance and sharing those.
I'm tempted to start a GoFundMe to get me flown out so I can attend general conference if opposed in person.
We'll make that happen.
So-
We'll make that happen.
And also people should feel free to not take the church seriously, not attend general conference, and not try to operate within their...
No, Sam, you're ruining my vibe.
We need all kinds, whatever speaks to you.
All right.
Sam's absolutely right. If that's what you need to do, particularly on conference weekend, if you just need to ignore it all and pretend it doesn't exist, please do.
Yeah,
Don't feel any pressure.
Bunch.
Yeah.
Did you watch general conference, Samantha?
Mm-mm.
No?
No.
Okay. All right. Well,
See,
hold it
that's
again.
why I watch it for people, so that I watch it so other people don't have to. That's my motto. When it's 4 a.m. and I'm watching the Saturday evening session and I'm shaking a little bit from caffeine, I'm like, I'm doing this so other people don't have to. I'm doing
Is
this so other people
Nemo
don't have to.
okay?
Can we call that Nemo's atonement? Like Nemo's sacrifice? Can we
Yeah,
call
I'm just
that?
making up for all the missionary work I did.
That's his Gethsemane.
Okay.
That's good. All right. Let's go to the next
Yeah.
slide. Nemo, what's
Yeah.
next?
So we got some new church officers. Tom Phillips, the man who blew the whistle on the second anointing, his son got an upgrade. And there's a little fun anecdote I can share about that. So
Mormon Stories podcast. We interviewed Tom Phillips years ago, and he lost his faith after being buddies with Elder Holland and being a stake president twice and getting a second anointing. He which is being told that you've made it to the celestial kingdom unless you kill somebody. That's one of the most important Mormon Stories episodes of all time. Go check it out right now. Pause this. Go watch that. It's groundbreaking, earth shattering. And you're telling us his son was just made a general authority. Go ahead, take that over, Nemo.
So his son was a Area 70, and he was my Area 70 that I dealt with a lot when I was working my concerns all the way up to Elder Oaks. And if you've not seen that, basically I got Elder Oaks to read a 3,500 word document I wrote, calling them all out as liars, and he tried to defend it and failed. Massive own goal on his part. So yeah, check that out later. But I've got a bit of a relationship with him. And then he got, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the church went, how are we going to deal with this? Administratively. So they sandboxed Russia and all their economic buddies like Kyrgyzstan and those sorts of places, put them in a new Europe East area. And all the leaders of that are now Russian nationals. So there's no GA70s there. They're all Area 70s. Then they took Europe North and brought it back because we used to have it in the early 2000s. And so we needed a Europe North area presidency. So Europe North Area Presidency was 2 GA70s and Alan Phillips. So Alan Phillips, Tom Phillips' son, as a Area 70 still, unpaid, was doing area presidency work until this conference when he got released. So I sent him an email straight away the moment he got released. I said, thanks for all your help during all this. I bet you're glad that I'm not your problem anymore. And sent it off. And then, 30 seconds later, he gets called as a General Authority 70, and I realise, okay, what they've actually done is just given him a pay rise so that he's actually getting paid for doing his job, and he's now got a seat at the table proper. So I sent him a second email saying, I guess you don't get away with it that easily.
They had to pay him to deal
You're a
with you.
troublemaker.
So that's my fun little anecdote about him getting upgraded to a GA70. But he looked very uncomfortable. There's some footage, I didn't get a chance to put it in, but he's there kind of sat looking quite uncomfortable at having to sit on the rostrum at the conference center. So we'll see what his career looks like.
All right. Well, so that's one calling that's super cool.
We got a new Young Women's General Presidency. That was pretty sweet. And they were released effective August 1st, I think is what they said. And then the new Young Women's Presidency will come into effect. There'll be new Young Women's Presidency. But the Young Men's General Presidency had something happen to it which was with effect immediately. And I'll tell you why I think that happened after we play the next clip.
Okay, so on to the next clip.
Effective immediately, we hereby release brothers Ahmed S. Corbitt and Bradley Ray Wilcox from serving as first and second counselors in the Young Men General Presidency. Those who wish to show appreciation to these brethren for their service may so manifest.
A few moments later.
It is proposed that we sustain the following as counselors in the Young Men General Presidency, effective immediately. Bradley Ray Wilcox as first counselor, and Michael T. Nelson as second counselor. All in favor may manifest it. Any opposed may so manifest.
Okay, Nemo, spell that out for us.
He failed upwards. The whole internet for like 30 glorious seconds thought Brad Wilcox had been released after the absolute abomination that was his talk in Alpine, Utah last year.
Brad, what about the white Wilcox?
Yes.
No, this is stunning because the biggest moment probably in Mormon Stories history was last year when we broke the story of Brad Wilcox.
It was February.
Yeah, February.
Yeah.
If you look at our YouTube statistics, they've been destroyed because the baseline was, normal. And then Brad Wilcox Day, there's a gazillion people who watch Mormon Stories, all of them completely shocked and outraged at, what were 2 or 3 of the worst things that Brad Wilcox said? Gerardo, do you remember?
The whites,
He said we should stop asking why the blacks didn't receive the priesthood until why black people didn't receive the priesthood until 1978. Yeah. What we should be asking is why the whites didn't receive the priesthood until 1830. That's one, right?
Yeah.
But
he also said other churches are playing church, that they're not really they're not really doing it properly.
Yeah.
That was another one.
Yeah.
There was something sexist. If you haven't seen, shameless plug, but we made a Brad Wilcox rap. Well, Brad made a Brad Wilcox rap on Zelf on the Shelf. That is well worth watching after this live stream.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah.
What was his thing? How come the girls? What was it? It's like, Brother Wilcox, how come the girls? Can't remember.
Don't have the priesthood.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, probably.
Yeah, it was just a horrendous talk, and honestly. So I guarantee you thousands, if not tens of thousands of people left the church because of Brad Wilcox talk. So if there was ever a time for the church to censure or distance themselves from somebody, this would have been the time.
Especially because he's been memed to death. Like to have him as like a youth leader just doesn't make sense. He's lost all respect. He's too memed.
It's kind of tone deaf.
Well, you Google Brad Wilcox and all you see is the controversy.
Yeah. But I guess they're defiant. I don't know. Nemo, how do you explain this?
So he came out with an apology and said, I miscalculated, I misthought. I then put out a video saying actually he's done this before. And there's other footage of him having done it. It's a talk that he had rehearsed and he had given a number of times, so it wasn't a spur of the moment mistake. So that apology meant nothing. Then Ahmed Corbitt, his counselor in the General Young Men's Presidency, came on to a video, and it was essentially a video of, "Hey, look, I have a black friend. I'm not racist." And so what they've done here is they can't get rid of Brad for some reason. He's too well beloved, so they've decided, well, we'll move Ahmed Corbitt away from him and bring someone else onto the Young Men's Presidency, and we'll, in the Mormon Church, you fail upwards. So
did you notice what happened with Ahmed, though?
Oh, yeah, so that's what I'm going to talk about next, is that he got made a General Authority 70. Yeah. Now, a prediction that I made alongside Colby Reddish on one of my halftime shows, and Colby brought this up, was that we think he's being positioned to be the next apostle. When one of these guys croaks, and it's only a matter of time,
Corbitt.
he's Corbitt. Corbett he's been made a GA70. I think he's gonna become the first African American or black apostle. I think that's what he's been positioned.
Sense, yeah.
And that's why they did it immediately. They didn't wait till the summer, because I think with the health problems that are going on within the quorum, someone's not going to make it till next conference, and he has to be in position to take place immediately.
And this is where critics of the church or post-Mormons have to be careful, because on the one hand, don't we all want to see more people of color in high church leadership? Gerardo, you're making a face. Why?
Oh man, I don't know how else to say it. I try to never be political, but I don't know. I can see why some people would have problems if the resemblance of the person of color that they're putting on as an apostle is for example, like Candace Owens. I can see why some critics
and
of
for
the
those
church
who don't
would
know Candace Owens, what
I don't
do you
get that
mean by
reference.
What do you mean by that?
So she's a political commentator, Republican, very conservative.
Who's black?
Who's a person of color, and a lot of liberal people or Democrats accuse her of being, kind of like a puppet for the Republicans. Whether you agree with that or not doesn't really matter. But my point is that I can see why some critics of the church would see Elder Corbitt and say, that's kind of like what the Republican Party has done with Candace Owens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel worthy of celebration to have a black person being a figurehead for a racist organization.
Right. And I guess it's more, just putting a woman in a position of power, I guess only is meaningful if the woman is really looking out for and representing her constituency, other women. But if all she's doing is doing the bidding of the men, then it's there's probably a word for that. Right?
Yeah, and because it almost has more potential for harm.
Is it tokenizing?
It's definitely that, yeah.
And
especially because they wouldn't even consider having a black apostle until it's become so necessary. And I mean, they still haven't done it, but.
Yeah.
And I would want to say that I'm making this comment very specifically because also other talks from Elder Corbitt have been, being controversial, where he's taking very regressive positions about, prophets, seers, and revelators and what that means and following them. And being really, 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 really orthodox to the point where it becomes a little unhealthy. So that's why I'm mentioning it.
And we've got some of that later in the episode as well, because we're going to look at some of Corbitt's talk and how he denigrates the very activism that means he's now in a position to have the priesthood, which is just wild when you actually think about it. But John, can you throw the next slide up for a second? Because I think this best represents how the internet felt about Brad Wilcox.
There we go. We'll go and read it for those who are listening.
Brad Wilcox released his young men's second counselor, smiley face. He's called his first counselor, shocked face.
Right.
It's that meme. It's a great meme.
Yeah, and people did reach out to me and say, "Whoa, he's been released. This is amazing!" Right?
Yeah, straight. And it's almost the same thing I did with Alan Phillips. I sent him a message going, "Oh yeah, cool, you've been released," and then boom, he gets called again. I was like, "Oh!" So I got whiplash. So there was a bit of conference whiplash over this, for sure. So we move on to the next slide, let's have a look at the audit statement, shall we? And just to set up some context for this, the church paid a $5 million settlement to the SEC in February. Was it February?
Security and Exchange Commission.
Yeah, the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States.
For what?
For hiding $32 billion of their assets in 13 shell companies over the course of about 20 years.
Yeah.
Not great behavior. I've been calling for church discipline against those involved, because if you read the church handbook carefully, all the actions undertaken to do such a thing necessitate church discipline, according to the handbook of instructions. So someone's bishop I will tell you, Russell M. Nelson's bishop has got a letter from me telling him that he may want to consider disciplinary action against one of his congregants because he is engaged in harmful financial behavior that has hurt members of the church. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
But
and people have been sharing that letter in their own wards and states. And
all over.
It's caused quite a stir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. And so it made international news. I've got a copy of the Financial Times up there, which it made front page news in the Financial Times. It's a big deal. And you would think the church auditing department would come out and say something about it, because it's their responsibility to say something about the finances of the church, to reassure the members that the finances of the church are in order. So perhaps they want to give a bit of extra reassurance to the members. Don't worry, despite the fine, everything is still okay, or, whatever. But what a lot of us predicted would happen was this. Would you play it?
To the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, dear brethren, directed by revelation, as recorded in section 120 of the Doctrine and Covenants, the Council on the Disposition of the Tithes, composed of the First Presidency, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and the presiding bishopric, authorizes the expenditure of church funds. Church entities disperse funds in accordance with approved budgets, policies, and procedures. Church auditing, which consists of credentialed professionals and is independent of all other church departments and entities, has responsibility to perform audits for the purpose of providing reasonable assurance regarding contributions received, expenditures made, and safeguarding of church assets. Based upon audits performed, church auditing is of the opinion that in all material respects, contributions received, expenditures made, and assets of the church for the year 2022 have been recorded and administered in accordance with church-approved budgets, accounting practices, and policies. The church follows the practices taught to its members of living within a budget, avoiding debt, and saving against a time of need. Respectfully submitted, Church Auditing Department, Jared B. Larson, Managing Director.
Right, watch Oaks. Nice little thumbs up there for the auditor. Good job, son.
Thank you, brethren.
So I just have to say that was one of the most Orwellian and shocking moments of my Mormon life. And, it was doubly shocking, the fact that the church just shamelessly ignored that anything had happened and gave that vanilla speech, not acknowledging the fact that they had just been fined and censured by the United States government and the Security Exchange Commission, was totally Orwellian and mind-blowing. But what was maybe for me even more shocking and mind-blowing was that there was no audible gasp or even rebellion amongst the membership, because the membership, many of them know that the church had been fined. So like the fact that there wasn't even outrage is just a double testament to, I guess, the power and the control that the church has. I don't know.
But John, they consider the matter closed.
Right.
Yeah, from their perspective, like they paid the fine,
Right. Yeah, but to say nothing like an apology, we're sorry, we goofed up, we'll try and do better, or even just to say we were fined, we disagree with it, but we should mention that to everybody. Like that was outrageous.
Well, even the wording that they use, that the church did everything right, and they used this wording of that the church spent the money according to the budgets that they had already preset. How did they know that we're going to get $1 million and a $4 million fine? And how, so even the wording that they is not just what they left out, it's also that the wording that you're using is a little deceptive.
I love how much of a sham it is, because if you listen to the words, he said, the money has essentially been spent in accordance with approved church budgets, policies, and practices.
Like, yeah, obviously.
So it's like, so we did everything the way that we wanted to.
Yeah.
We wanted to pay the fine, actually.
But isn't a budget something you do previously? You
Mm-hmm.
you have a budget and then you spend according to that budget. But if you're going to get a fine that you didn't know about, how do you...
So in that case, we'd expect to see something next year, because they'll in that financial year, then yes, they'll see it.
I guess that's true. Yeah, I guess that's true.
So watch this space, people.
Yeah.
That was like the energy of when my dad asks me how my finances are going. So good.
And you're like, I have spent my money in accordance with my approved budgets.
With my approved budgets retroactively.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh dear.
I said on another podcast that this is a brilliant opportunity, a lost opportunity for the Mormon Church to model the repentance that it teaches its members and that it taught us all. That you have to confess the sin, that you have to make restitution, forsake the sin, and this was a really important missed opportunity for the church to model what it teaches, and it's really unfortunate.
And it's the irony is we had some talks this conference about repentance and about how repentance will involve changing the way you act and doing things slightly differently and acknowledging what went wrong. And you're just there thinking, okay, great, you're teaching this to us, do it yourself.
Yeah,
please. Thank you.
Really quickly, a quick shout out to Catherine Class, who writes Brad, shaking my head, and she throws in a super chat donation. We really appreciate it, Catherine, because these donations go to help pay for Samantha, Gerardo, Nemo, and Maven, and me. So thanks for your super chats and your support. Please subscribe on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else. All right, Nemo, what's next? What's next in the agenda?
What's next? Okay, so this session, there's really nothing to say. Other than K. Brett Natras is an interesting chap, and he came right after a guy who kind of just shuffled up. He ran to the pulpit. Like, he was so excited to be getting his chance to speak. It was wild. Bragg also moved quite quick. But that was only an hour-long session. That's all we're going to say about that. It was an hour-long session. It went short. And I wonder whether Holland was due to speak in that session, and so therefore they cut it short. But I've noticed that evening session was short last year as well. So that one seems to be kind of getting a bit shorter.
Yeah. Well, there's I imagine that was not the most interesting or fulfilling session, even though it was an hour. Is that true, Nemo?
Yeah, it was boring as dishwater. If I'm honest, it was not great. But what was interesting was it was a session with no apostles. So this is what conference would look like if everyone doing it was under the age of 60. This is what conference looks like when young people speak. So it was slightly more engaging, I guess. But
isn't it interesting that a lot of people were pointing out that Nelson didn't speak in any of the sessions on Saturday?
Yeah, that's not normal. Yeah,
he didn't even do like a welcome to conference or anything.
Yeah,
which he normally does.
He's got his peace prize, He's just basking now. He doesn't need. He's said all that needs to be said. He's like Dalai Lama. He has one line. He's just doing the hits.
But in all seriousness, he's 98, right?
Yeah.
But he moves like if he was 60, dude.
Okay.
Does he?
Yeah, like watch him on the video conference, how he walks.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
But then he has to have a little stool when he stands.
Yeah.
So for too long. And I don't like to focus too much on how they're doing physically, but I think it is important. Iring looked tired. Like, he looked worn out this conference. Even Oakes isn't looking as kind of chipper as he normally is. Well, chipper's the wrong word. That man hasn't smiled in a long time. But it wasn't looking he didn't have as much zest for life.
The most senior ones are octo or nonogenarians running a $250 billion multinational corporation. Like, it's just inhumane. Really quickly, shout out to Doug Vincent. Doug writes, "Gotta support Miami." He goes, "Doug, you're always a great supporter. Thanks for the super chat."
I liked Doug's comment where he said, "Sack the Bradster."
Sack the Bradster. All right, Nemo, back to you.
Next session. Let's roll up to the next one.
We're basically skipping Saturday evening. All right.
All right. There's really nothing to say. So the next one we have, again, we got Kazuhiko Yamashita. Was interesting because he gave the second talk of the weekend about patriarchal blessings. He kind of got up and went, "Oh, someone else has already talked about it, but I kind of want to talk about it too, so I'm going to talk about it." Almost as though they weren't coordinated for some reason. But what was interesting is his talk was a lot more positive about patriarchal blessings. He was saying, you get them and they're great and it's all lovely, etc. It was almost like a convert's perspective. The other talk from an earlier session on Saturday about patriarchal blessings legitimately said, you should get a patriarchal blessing while there are still major life decisions to be made. Stop and think about that for a moment. encourage people to get patriarchal blessings while they still have major life decisions in front of them. Why would the church want that, do you think, Sam?
Yeah, rope them in.
Because it's more about influence than it is prediction, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you can't rely on the simple gift of the Holy Ghost that is supposed to be, you know,
Guiding
the
us
driving force behind decisions. That's not enough. You need a patriarchal blessing
to tell you you're going to
to
serve
tell
a
you to
mission.
get married after 4 months.
You're going to
or,
get married in the
serve a mission, or
temple.
do all the things that you already know you should do.
You'll pay your tithing. You
Yeah.
will live the law of chastity. You will serve in your callings. Yeah, it's predictive, right? It's yeah.
So,
Hand over your power further to the patriarchy.
Right.
But the main things about this session were Anderson. Basically, Neil L. Anderson gave us a bit of a Freudian slip, which is the next video, where he clearly thinks of President Nelson, because he often is up there with what I call the PBK award, which is the Prophet Butt Kisser award, which is the person who quotes Russell M. Nelson the most. That session, and he's often in the contention, and I wonder whether he views Russell M. Nelson as literally Jesus, because this is what he had to say, as a bit of a Freudian slip.
I'm scared.
Jesus is never in a forgotten corner, because our thoughts of him are always present, and all that is in us adores him.
Always president.
Jesus is always president. No.
Indeed.
Yeah. Good catch.
Sorry, that was just a short one for a bit of light relief. The main thing in that session was actually Russell M. Nelson himself, and this was his war. This was his talk where he tried to get his Peace Prize. Yeah, Sam, you've done an episode on this. Tell us a little bit about what you thought about his talk.
This talk, yeah, basically our whole conference review episode on Zelf ended up being about this whole be kind thing. I suppose the general gist of my opinion is just it's completely meaningless, and General Conference has been responsible for so much unkindness over the entirety of its existence. Simply Governor Cox of Utah, did you see this? Called Nelson's talk a masterclass in kindness, despite the fact that it doesn't wrestle with any complexity, dispel any us versus them thinking, encourage people to do anything that would actually widen their circle of compassion, like, removing their biases or questioning the narratives they have about people not in their in-group, which is kind of the primary function of General Conference, is to perpetuate those narratives. No, didn't do any of that. I was just like, be kind.
Be kind, be nice.
Well, should we play it?
Be nice.
Yeah. Play the
Let's
first
play.
clip.
Okay.
Even now, decades later, I find myself wondering if the contaminated scalpel that landed in my arm was any more toxic than the venomous contention that infects our civic dialogue and too many personal relationships today. Civility and decency seem to have disappeared during this era of polarization and passionate disagreements. Vulgarity, fault-finding, and evil speaking of others are all too common. Too many pundits, politicians, entertainers, and other influencers throw insults constantly. I'm greatly concerned that so many people seem to believe that it is completely acceptable to condemn, malign, and vilify anyone who does not agree with them. Many seem eager to damage another's reputation with pathetic and pithy barbs.
You hear that, Jeffrey Holland? He's calling you pathetic when you maligned Matt for his valedictorian speech at BYU.
Okay, really quickly, we want to try and give credit where credit is due and to be kind. And so I just want to say, if the Mormon Church were to come to me, which I'm sure they will at some point, and say, John, what's one talk that we should give in General Conference? I would have said, give a talk about being kind, about decreasing polarization in society, and increasing peacemaking, bridge building, love, and respect. And so can we begin by actually thanking or congratulating Russell M. Nelson for giving the talk that we all probably think he should be giving. Because I can say that for many people, my family members, Patrick Mason, friends of mine, they would have said they were deeply inspired and moved and grateful for this talk. Now, can we extend a little bit of grace and then attack? What do you guys think? Any grace?
Here's the thing, right?
Sam.
I agree with him. I do think civility is like a value that we should all be striving for a bit more. I do think we are too polarized. Those things are all true. It's an extremely surface level take, but those things are true. But a few points. First of all, the people watching, believers' ideas about what it means to be kind, what it means to be loving, are completely informed by Mormonism and these types of conferences, which have advocated for the kind of us versus them thinking that he is now, like softly, nicely condemning others for. So it feels completely hypocritical, for one thing, because it's like your entire church is like relies on us versus them thinking. He even talked about condemning, maligning, and vilifying people for not agreeing with you. So that's what so much of General Conference has been for like the last decade, and just throughout the history of the church, is condemning, vilifying, and maligning people who have left. But it's like those people, in Russell's mind, they're probably not important enough to be worth widening your circle of compassion for, because obviously he didn't call out any specific groups of people or do any kind of atonement for the ways that he has like advanced us versus them thinking that has made people less kind. Also, he's supposed to be the God's mouthpiece on the earth today, and he's saying, polarization, blah blah blah, and it's like there's no meaningful addressing of what is causing polarization, or there's no like meaningful reflection on like there are serious injustices going on in the world that it's totally understandable that people are really angry about, but let's talk about nonviolent communication. Let's have some like actionable conversation about what we can do to make things better, while also making sure that we're not just being passive to injustice, because that's what he's longing to return to. His longing to return to civility is just a time when, white supremacy was the norm and nobody challenges it. And it's like, yeah, we do see a lot of polarization anytime there is an advancement in like social justice, or whenever people start fighting for any cause, there's always pushback, and it's not ideal, but it is kind of, there's just like no meaningful exploration of any of that. So to consider, I just don't really consider this meaningful in any way. Like sure, be kind, and maybe it will inspire some members to be a bit kinder. But most members' ideas of what it means to be kind is just dropping cookies off to a member of their in-group, or dropping cookies off to a member of their out-group to try and get them to be back in the in-group. Not, how can I challenge my narratives about people who are not in my in-group so that I am more genuinely compassionate, and not just compassionate through the lens of getting spiritual brownie points. Sorry, I'm really going off here.
Beautiful.
But so like, yes, I think we need to be more civil. Do I think we need to all treat each other with respect regardless of our beliefs? Yes, because I think that when we treat people like they are their beliefs, they cling to their beliefs. Sorry, when we treat people like their beliefs are their identity, they cling to them as such. Everyone does deserve kindness and respect and civility. I agree with that, but it's just the shallowest take. Like, he's what was he, 98? It's like, I, a 30-year-old, shouldn't be able to give a better take than the president of this multi-billion-dollar organization who's responsible for being the mouthpiece of Christ on this earth today. Like there's so many people on this planet who are so much more inspiring than that. So I know that you like to give credit where credit is due, and like I get that, and I see where you're coming from. But it just
as you roll your eyes,
coming from with disdain written on my face. No, like as I said, like agree fundamentally, but it just the hypocrisy and the complete lack of awareness that is like part of it. It's really hard for me to really celebrate it that much, because again, I feel like if you want to make your church kinder, then you need to challenge some narratives, which, you have been responsible for perpetuating. I mean, isn't it him who talked about lazy learners and, hasn't openly maligned entire groups of people? And isn't that what him and all the people at the top are doing all the time? And isn't that what most devotionals and stake firesides, and isn't that what all of it is mostly about? And then he gets up and says that, and then we're all just supposed to clap him. It just doesn't do anything. It's just doublespeak, right?
Yeah.
Gerardo?
That's what.
Oh,
No, Gerardo, please.
Oh, so wasn't he supposed to receive an award for fighting against prejudice and being
Anti-racism.
Yeah,
and being like super peaceful?
some civil rights group in
Right.
Georgia awarded him like the Gandhi,
The
Martin
Gandhi
Luther King, Nelson
Mandela.
Mandela Prize of Peace.
Yeah.
And what's
Which
wrong
they
with
had
that?
to have paid
Well,
for.
there was so
What's
many
wrong with that,
people against it, right? And there was, I think, like change.org or like several people emailing this organization saying, well, this is kind of BS. This is the type of talk that you would be expecting of him giving after pushback from him receiving that award, right?
Oh, you think it might have
Yeah.
been a response to
Right,
that?
Definitely.
right. So saying like, well, guess what? I didn't just give one talk about against prejudice. Now I'm giving a second talk against prejudice just after I received this award. So there's that.
And he's also only talking about prejudice in these like large sweeping terms. He's not calling out any systemic prejudice or like
Right.
doing anything that would be actually meaningful.
No.
Yeah. And another point is like, what are actually, like you said, Samantha, what are average conservative member sitting in general conference and watching general conference thinking in their mind of what he's referring to? You know, they're not thinking, oh, I have to be more loving to my LGBT child, or I have to,
Or
you
to
know.
the DesNat people,
right.
I need to stop being so vicious on the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there were other talks in this very conference, right?
Exactly.
Saying like, don't do that, don't bow down, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's not what they're thinking, and he's not being specific. So, you know, the amount of people that are taking that are gonna take something meaningful out of it, and you know, and put it in practice as to what really peacemaking means, you know, it's probably relatively small. And then the other one is like, aren't they rewarding people that have been you know, that have advanced polarization, like Wilcox? Like they're giving him an upgrade. You know, what
That's a
about
good
Corbitt?
point.
They're giving him an upgrade.
Yeah.
So they're rewarding people that are known to be you know, that to, you know, be given these types of talks that are kind of out there. And so
With like no meaningful distinction between, because it kind of just feels like it's reinforcing the Mormon narrative of like contention is of the devil, right? Which easily carries over into fighting for social justice is of the devil, which they're now actually explicitly saying too.
right.
But, so he's just lumping everything together. So then when a member sees someone who's angry about racial injustice, in their minds, they're just thinking like, they're not being very kind, you know? It just feels like it has more, you can never really know the net positive or the net negative of a thing like this. But I'd be really surprised.
Who
if
do
it
you
was a net
think,
positive.
John, who do you think Nelson is talking to or speaking to? Like, what is he talking about?
Honestly, I think someone on his mind is people like us, like critics of the church. But I think he probably is bothered by political animosity. I think he's probably bothered by all the people that criticized him for supporting vaccines in the church, for supporting mask wearing in the church, you know, and he's probably honestly tired of like ultra conservative, almost like fundamentalist Denver Snuffer type Mormons attack, you know, or the Meldrumites and the Heartland Theory people, or the Daniel Peterson kind of like former Maxwell Institute classic apologists attacking the Joseph Smith Papers Project.
Do you think he's even that engaged? Do you
I
think
mean,
he's
I'm probably giving him too much credit.
Yeah. I feel like this is a classic example of kind of with like the Uchtdorf talk about how you raise children. Like we don't need to know really what his intentions are, because they may be good and that's fine. And it kind of doesn't really matter what they are either way. All we can do is look at the substance. And again, like the lack of any like actionable advice for becoming more compassionate, which other belief systems and religions have baked into them. Like Buddhism has various strategies for widening your circle of compassion until it includes everyone. But it just feels like you saying be kind is, sorry, I feel like I'm repeating myself,
No,
but
it's good.
saying be kind is
It's
not,
glib. It's glib.
it's not doing anything to address, well, what is it that helps people become kinder? What limits our ability to be kind to others? Well, it's us versus them thinking, like almost all of the time, which is what conference is usually all about.
Nemo, I have a final thought, but do you want to give a take before I give a final take on this particular point?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a reason that Sam's comments get made into shorts and mine don't, because hers are better than mine. But what I would say is that in isolation, and in fact, a family member said this to me, so I can't even take credit for this, but a family member said to me, his talk was great out of context. In context, it's massively hypocritical and does nothing to forward the position of the church that it actually believes any of these things, because it's not showing them. So it's teaching its members to act one way. Even if you take the best possible reading of this, they're teaching the members of the church to act one way, one not acting that way themselves. You've just got to look at musket fire. You've just got the musket fire talk. You've just got to look at what Jeffrey R. Holland said about Matt Easton and his valedictorian speech. You've just got to look at Brad Wilcox, like Gerardo said. You just have to look at what these church leaders do and say. Actions speak louder than words. So he can talk about how we all need to be peaceful, but until they're actually doing something to reduce contention in the world, until they're actually stepping up. Like, where was he when the conflict in Ukraine broke out? Where was he to stand up and saying that this needs to stop? He actually just gave a talk saying that, well, we should remove contention in our own hearts and in our own interpersonal relationships. Nothing from a global faith leader on what we can do or what should happen in the cessation of a invasion of one country by another. Nothing. Not a word. So, again, it's hollow and hypocritical.
And it's almost virtue signaling, and it feels it feels more about image than anything else. And also it just makes me think of like such a hallmark, I feel like, of racism as it has existed in America, is just this idea that everyone is very polite and like we don't say anything out of line. And, you know, black people, if they get remotely angry at any point, like are just immediately dismissed and belittled. Like politeness and, you know, the surface of the water appearing calm is kind of a hallmark of a lot of oppressive systems. Like that's how they function. That's how we keep them going. So I feel like to just say be kind and, you know, just advocate for that sort of surface level kindness without calling out injustices in systems, which is the true unkindness that is operating insidiously and in a way that gets good people to be unkind.
Right.
Didn't someone in this, sorry, John, just before you go, didn't someone in this conference or around this conference talk about Potemkin and his towns that all seemed lovely from the outside but were hollow? Is this not just Potemkinism? Isn't he? Is he not just? That's Mormonism, isn't it?
Have a massive passive aggression crisis that damages families and children enormously.
Yeah. So I'll just note, I have like 3 points. I note that for Orthodox, speaking of polarization, I'll note that for Orthodox believing Mormons, this was by far probably one of the most inspiring General Conference talks of their lifetime. And then
is on the floor.
And then you switch to Mormon Stories podcast, and this will be the one that we ranted most about. That got Samantha to go on like a 5-minute rant. Who's someone who doesn't like to speak more than 20 words per?
That's so dependent. But just a thing I want to point out.
She's gonna go more, and yet she has more.
I'm going again. Okay, start the short. No, just kidding. Like what he's saying, that you know, he's essentially advocating for nonviolent communication and all these things. Those are things that I advocate for on my YouTube channel. On Self on the Shelf, like we do believe in like what he's saying. It's just that he's doing it on such a surface level, again with like rampant hypocrisy, and he's the leader of a multi-billion-dollar organization with massive power to enact like kind, compassionate, systemic change, and is not doing it. So it's not that I'm obviously in disagreement with what he says. Like I believe in those values, and I believe I do bring those values to the way I try and show up in content. And you know, even now, like I'm ranting, but like, am I being unkind? No. Like sometimes kindness looks like righteous anger. You know, it's. I mean, I don't feel like too angry, but you know what I'm saying. It's
something they failed to mention about Palm Sunday. They're all going on about Palm Sunday. They failed to mention the cleansing of the temple, where Jesus enacted righteous indignation and flipped tables.
Which they
so Sam, go flip some tables
to justify their nonsense.
Sam's about to throw a bottle at me. Gerardo, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to say that. Well, just to challenge your point a little bit, John, too. You know, when we see,
never compliment Russell M. Nelson in front of this crowd ever.
No, don't do it, John. That's a mistake.
if you think about a company, that is polluting, and throwing garbage to the Great Salt Lake and polluting the Great Salt Lake, and then they get hit with a fine, or they, donate $5 million to the Amazon in Brazil, like, does that fix the problem? Should we applaud them for that $5 million?
Or if they give some public statement about taking care of the environment
Right.
as one of the world's greatest polluters? Is that your point?
Right. At the same time, polluting more,
Right.
because we have Wilcox being promoted and
Yeah.
Corbitt being promoted.
No,
This
it's
is like
fair.
kindness washing, greenwashing in the environmental world. Kindness washing, right there.
No, it's all fair. So the other 2 points I'll make, if Samantha will let me, I'm just kidding, is, when he went and enumerated all the different types of people that are guilty of hateful speech,
Influences.
he mentions
influences.
I'm not hateful about him, but you're allowed to punch up a little bit satirically
Samantha
sometimes.
won't let me say three sentences.
sorry.
No, it's good. He mentions pundits. He mentions influencers. He mentions politicians. This would have been a great opportunity for him to say religious leaders, and then to go even one step further and say, even I have been guilty of this in the past, and I are committed to doing better. If he had just redirected it at himself and to our organization, what a powerful impact that would have had.
Yeah, this is what's so frustrating, because most people on this earth will maintain that they try to be kind and that they are a kind person. Few people are going to be like, no, I'm not kind, I'm unkind.
I'm a jerk.
Yeah, because the way that you actually become kinder is by challenging the ways that you maybe impose your narratives on other groups of people, or the ways that you see certain types of people as not deserving of compassion.
Yeah.
So it's like, it would be so powerful to hear from a leader of an organization this powerful, what are some ways that he has recognized his shadow side creeping out? But of course, this is a man who's received his second anointing and has been guaranteed access to heaven no matter what he does. So, like, is there any meaningful exploration at that point? I don't really know. I'm not in his head, but
and they painted themselves into this corner that we don't seek or offer apologies. So
Yeah.
they literally can't
and
apologize.
the worst thing I think you can do for building compassion, which is a skill that needs to be cultivated throughout life. Like, it's not just a one and done thing, building compassion. The worst thing you can do is just assert that, like, I am kind and my organization is the kindest organization in the world. And if you just see yourself as kind all the time, you're going to be completely blind to the ways that you are not kind, because no human is compassionate 100% of the time. Maybe there's a few Zen monks, but like, it takes ongoing work to build the skill of compassion. And you never really hear, certainly not in that talk, there's just no exploration of ways he's analyzed it, because he sees himself as someone who's transcended the human condition, which so antithetical to helping people build kindness.
I wonder if that's why they feel as though, like, why they're stuck with this massive hoard of wealth, or whether it's a contributing factor. They already view themselves as charitable and kind and good.
Exactly.
So, like, well, what more could we do? And so they've got just this surplus because they can't get it through their head that they could do more, because they already view themselves as running at max.
And anyone criticizing how much they are doing is going to get the unkind label slapped on them for being, first of all, you're not allowed to be an activist. So that's already one strike. And then, you're not allowed to be, like, speaking out in ways that are vulgar, which, to them, it's like you use a swear word and instantly your point is null, regardless of whether your point is a deeply compassionate point and humor's just kind of part of your communication style, and you're not directing it in like a hateful way towards an individual person who's kind of beneath you in some way.
I feel like Sam's looking for acceptance there from the Mormon Church for her channel Self on the Shelf. Please listen to us, even though we swear.
Channel, but we do like comedy.
Yeah.
Nemo, should we play the next clip? Because we haven't even got the second clip yet.
Yeah,
All
go
right,
for it.
Play the second clip of Russell and Nelson.
As disciples of Jesus Christ, we are to be examples of how to interact with others, especially when we have differences of opinion. One of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ is how compassionately that person treats other people.
Yeah, Mr. November 2015 policy. How's that? Sorry, I shouldn't have snorted in derision during
Gerardo,
it either. I feel bad.
First, and then Samantha.
I thought that was a good statement. I thought, I think he's calling out his own members and saying, you have to be specifically.
Really quick, Gerardo, is this personal to you? Because even though the November 2015 exclusion policy happened while Thomas S. Monson was prophet, it's widely understood that Monson had dementia and that Nelson, as the most senior apostle, was probably the guy who rammed that through and then later doubled down by saying it was doctrine, which is a really homophobic, hateful thing to have done to a supposedly 17 million member church. Is this in some ways personal to you, Gerardo?
Yeah. Well, and it also affects how, other people treat us who are members of the church, family members. Something I wanted to say was that it is interesting that my husband and I have noticed that the people who we feel closest to or more kindness, that they're kinder to us, or they treat us, they don't treat us differently, or they see us as, their equals, are always Mormons who are a lot more progressive on their views, who don't listen to everything that the prophet has to say, who probably don't pay tithing sometimes, who don't have the most prominent callings, and the people who are the most orthodox, who listen and heed to all the words of the prophets, are the ones who have alienated us the most. So yeah, it is kind of interesting, to see to notice that difference. And like, again, going back to what we've been talking, like how much do these words really are going to have an impact? I don't know, but
would it be overstating it, Gerardo, to say that for you, the current living faces of LGBT bigotry in Mormon church leadership are the faces of Dallin H. Oaks and Russell M. Nelson? For you?
Yeah, for sure.
So to have him saying, let's speak kind words, makes you feel what?
Well, I feel like he's being hypocritical a little bit.
Yeah, it's hurtful. Samantha, you've got a hot take.
Okay, so he said, as disciples of Christ or whatever, we need to be examples in how we interact with people who have different opinions to us, right? And I agree that the way we all interact with people who believe differently to us is very important. I know I do, content creation, but if I meet, the most Mormon, patriarchal, sexist, I could meet sort of the most bigoted type of person in real life, and I try to interact with them through the lens of like, okay, they're the product of their genetics and conditioning. How can I bring compassion to this conversation and treat them with respect and dignity without obviously endorsing any of their view? But I'm not someone who like goes in guns blazing if I have an interaction with a believer, not at all. I don't think it's effective or useful. So he's saying we need to be examples when we encounter people with different opinions. What did we see around, what was his name, Brian? The guy who opposed. What did we see all around him when he did that? People looking away, people refusing to watch. And I feel like that feels so symbolic of kind of just the whole phenomenon of like when people leave the LDS church, what happens a lot of the time? Their loved ones don't even ask them why. They aren't willing to turn towards the suffering because they're worried the suffering will infect them in some way because it threatens their belief system. And I feel like that is at the root of so much unkindness in the world, is like we're scared to challenge our own perceptions about ourselves and life. And so we protect ourselves and our perceived identities, which aren't our truest identities. And the cost of that is that we don't turn towards the suffering of others because it's too threatening to do so. So I just feel like that guy voting opposed and everyone averting their gaze all around him was the perfect example of that in action. And again, we've seen time and time again at General Conference, them encouraging members to not turn towards the suffering of certain people. They might pay lip service to it, like, we need to love them. But we've heard, there's a million quotes we could give of, if you have a gay son, don't have them over for tea, or like whatever the thing was. There's just so much rhetoric that has been perpetuated at General Conference that encourages members to project their own narratives, self-soothing narratives about other people, like whether it's gay people or feminists or intellectuals or people who leave the church, instead of, like, I think the way that we all become kinder and more compassionate is turning towards the suffering and saying, what's your story? Like, what's your truth? I have my, like, it's recognizing that we all have our own preconceived notions that are often limiting our ability to be compassionate. And it is that willingness to genuinely hear the stories of others. I feel like this is why this podcast is so great. That's what expands our compassion. Like, that's an actionable way that happens. So again, it just feels very meaningless hearing him say, because, you know, it's like he's advocating for politeness essentially, which, like, great. But there are so many, like, politeness is just the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to compassion. There are so many levels deep that you can go. There are so many other, like, belief systems, ideologies, religions, Buddhism, for example, that do go to the depths of that. And so, yeah, I've said enough.
It's beautiful. I love how passionate and articulate you are about this, Samantha. So thank you for that. And the viewers and listeners are loving it as well. Really quickly, thanks to Lydia Belem from New Zealand. She says, thanks, Mormon Stories. You help me and my family so much. Keep the messages coming. Much love. Thanks, Lydia. Thanks for the super chat and the donation. And our beloved Radio Free Mormon donated and said, for God's sake, would somebody get Nemo a proper shirt? Nemo.
What's he wearing?
I don't know what's wrong with my shirt.
Why is RFM dissing your shirt, Nemo?
I don't know. It doesn't have superheroes on it, maybe.
That's what I was going to say.
Please check out Mormonism Live every Wednesday night at 6:20 with Bill Reel and RFM and Maven. We love you, RFM. Thanks for joining us. And you suck for not joining this panel tonight. You were invited, you declined, yes. And now you're in the comments. You officially.
Well, no, that's me on scheduling. So
kind as I got called out.
He was up for it. That was my fault. Blame me.
Nemo, are we done with Nelson, or do we have more?
I think we're done with Nelson, but I'm not done with Sam Shelley, because I want to say, John, I don't appreciate her level of passion. Sam, can we bring the British apathy back, please? I'm going to have to revoke your British card if you continue to be so impassioned and and forward about these things.
I ain't even bothered again.
Thank you. That's the energy we're after. Okay, let's move on.
So we finally are at the last session of General Conference, which is the Sunday afternoon session. We made it. Last one.
Looks like we've got two bangers up ahead.
Yeah. Well, damn it, jokes. That talk, I was tempted to put that talk in here at like 20 times speed and just run it through for like a minute, because all he did was he got up and said, basically, after Adam and Eve, anytime it talks about the Lord in Scripture or deity in Scripture, it's Jesus. Can you put that slide up on the screen for me, John? I've called this Down Late Jokes Trolls Nemo. So if anyone watches my halftime shows, they'll know that I keep account of something called Jesus, Joe, or Russell. It's a little game we play. And it's a game of who is quoted more, Jesus Christ, Joseph Smith, or Russell M. Nelson. Russell M. Nelson has a habit of winning. So he gets quoted directly. And this is not who's talked about more, but who's quoted directly more. Because they do a lot of speaking in the name of Jesus Christ, but they speak their own words in his name. They don't teach Jesus' words as often as they teach Russell M. Nelson's words. And Russell M. Nelson was actually winning 40 to 34, I believe it was, against Jesus. Joseph Smith's always in the background. He was on like 10. So you've got Russell M. Nelson streaking ahead in the lead, and then you come into the final session, and Dan Jokes delivers this talk, which I'm convinced was just to mess with me. He quoted Jesus Christ 36 times in that talk. He just got up there, quoted Jesus, just reeled them off, said the words, "We believe in Jesus Christ," and it was just a big middle finger to everyone who says that Mormons aren't Christians, and to everyone who says that people like me, that they're too focused on the words of their prophets and they don't speak about Jesus enough. So Oakes was like, right, well, screw you, Nemo. I'm going to ruin all this for you. That was that talk.
So you're salty, Nemo.
I'm taking it very personally.
All right. Quick shout out to Cactoid Jim for the super chat. He writes, someone said Nemo needs a new shirt, and clothing the poor is a kind thing to do.
Wow.
I think. So thanks, Cactoid Jim, for donating Nemo shirt fund.
Okay. Cheers, Cactoid Jim. What shirt shall I get, guys?
I need a really expensive shirt.
I need a BYU shirt, I think. I need one of those ones with a Y on.
Rise and shout, the Cougars are out. Okay.
Yeah, so someone send me a BYU shirt. Do that.
Okay.
So I think what we can do after Oakes, because his talk was a complete nothing burger, and yet, you know, he did what we asked him to do. We wanted more Jesus, so he gave us more Jesus. But he gave us none of his own prophetic insight. It's like when he responded to my 3,500 word letter by saying, "Fair Mormon says this about me and my honesty." So, well, great, actually, but I wanted to hear what you had to say, Dallin. So, yeah. That's all I got to say about that, John.
You guys are going to hate me, but I'm going to say it again. There's a perspective that I think is a credible one, that with you ex-Mormons, the church, they can do nothing to please you. You complain that the church has hateful rhetoric, and then when they talk about peace, Samantha complains for 12 hours. And then
I have a PR degree, okay? It's like, I'm not going to celebrate like obvious PR moves.
The other example is finally we get them talking more about Jesus than Joseph Smith, Russell, and Nelson, and you ex-Mormons are going to complain. Come on. I know it's a little bit funny, but there's a little bit of truth to that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's almost nothing they can do to make you guys happy.
I recognize that about myself. You know, I'll own up to that and be like, you know what? I'm mad about it, even though I shouldn't be, because he absolutely did what I'd been criticizing them for not doing. But it's just the way he did it. He didn't talk about Jesus more organically and give his own opinions and teach from the words of Jesus. He just spoke the words of Jesus verbatim. It's like an on-off switch. They can either talk about Jesus and quote him verbatim, or they can just kiss Russell M. Nelson's butt and quote him all the time, but they don't seem to be able to incorporate the words of Jesus into their teachings.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
they're
problem.
still just invoking the words of Jesus to suit their own multi-billion-dollar corporation purposes. So again, it's like having, you know, a black person in a prominent position. It's like, great, but you're like serving the aims of this white supremacist organization. Isn't it kind of like in that same vein? I mean, I think that's why ex-Mormons have an issue with stuff a lot of the time, is because it feels like they will just do these shallow PR like responses to issues that are so deep. And it's like, you're such a powerful organization. You're deliberately not diving any deeper or addressing things in a more meaningful way.
Samantha, you're proving my point.
Yeah,
And it's
I love to prove a point.
yeah.
All right. No, it's good. And also Rebecca Shrine donates and says,
Oh,
Nemo,
thank
your
you.
shirt is fine.
Thank you.
So save your money, Nemo.
I
is what
appreciate
Rebecca's
that.
saying. All right. Thanks for the support, Rebecca. Samantha's got one more point.
It's just like, instead of just quoting Jesus, act like Jesus. Do something Christ-like. Like you're all sitting up there in your velvet chairs and your suits and ties, and there's like no. Don't just.
Samantha,
Well, no. If you go back to Gong's
Samantha,
talk,
we're officially going to retitle this Samantha Rants. That's going to be
yeah. I think we should.
With the thumbnail needs to just be Samantha. And
Yeah.
No, I'm
A
just
woman
kidding.
ranting, not ideal.
No, you're brilliant, Samantha. I'm just giving you a hard time. Nemo, go ahead. What were you going to say, Nemo?
No. There's 2 points there. Like the first, if you go back to Gong's talk, actually, he slummed it with the plebs. Like the beginning of his talk was he went down amongst the great unwashed and spoke to them, and you know, wasn't it lovely that he did so? And then the second point is that this also, the reason that this seems shallow is it came off the back of literally every speaker going, "Did you know it's Palm Sunday? Did you know it's Palm Sunday? We just learnt what Palm Sunday is, don't you know? It's Palm Sunday." The rest of the Christian world have been doing this for 1,000 years. At least. And he's like, "Oh, but did you know it's Holy Week? Oh, did you know there's names for the days that are coming up?" Sorry, it's late at night. I get a little bit like this. But the point was they'd made this point to sound more mainstream and Christian.
Yeah.
And Oakes his talk was literally just, can't be bothered to write a real talk. I finally got one of those Bibles where it's got all the red writing for where Jesus speaks. Really neat. So he just looked through one of those and went, "That'll do," and just gave that talk. It was low effort.
I just really don't think this is the kind of stuff Jesus would be caring about his disciples doing. Like his message was clear of, you know, feed the hungry, clothe the poor, minister to the sick. Like just quoting him and being like, "It's Palm Sunday, and did you know all these like little details?" It's like, does he care? Is he that much of a narcissist that's what he cares about over, you know?
Well, he cares about the correct name of the church, so clearly.
He really cares about that. And he workshopped it for a while, so you can't blame him.
No,
Gerardo?
you can't.
Was it Nelson who made the association between the palms of Jesus and Palm Sunday?
Yeah.
Was it Nelson? Oh, my good friend Brenton Erickson, who studied ancient languages at BYU, he pointed that that's totally bogus.
It's the palm leaves.
Yeah. That the palm leaves in Hebrew, Aramaic don't have like any relations to the word for the palms of Jesus, and that's just showing how
out of touch or uninformed.
Uninformed, and also how he's like always willing, like always trying to find something to impress people when it's not even that good of an argument or point.
Because in that conference, the whole weekend we had this word means this in the Old French and the Latin. We had this word means this in the Greek, didn't you know? And we had the Hebrew as well. So we had a few ancient languages. And I'm always skeptical the moment someone goes, the original meaning of this word was X or Y. The moment anyone gets into etymology, like Gerardo said, I start to get a little bit nervous, because often it is Anglicisms, like the fact that palm, it's like the word steak and steak. They come from two completely different etymologies, but they sound the same. So we can make a cool little kind of teaching device out of them. And yes, you can, but don't go pretending that etymologically they're linked, because they're not. Rant over.
So really quickly, to prove my point even further, Gina Marie DeMio writes, John makes it hard to watch sometimes. So I'm not doing my job as a good ex-Mormon. I'm trying to represent multiple sides, and Gina's calling me out on it. I don't know. I haven't proved myself worthy of what you want ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons to be.
John,
Gina.
block out the haters. Make no apologies.
Yeah.
But people who say that all you want to do is criticize the church, I'm like, have you been on a panel with John? It's a fucking struggle.
I'm tedious. I'm so tedious. Never
His
stick up for the
slavish
church.
devotion to tedium.
Very good. Okay, Nemo, what's next?
Yeah, this is the final clip. This is Ahmed Corbitt, the man who, like I said earlier, denigrates the very activism that allows him to hold the priesthood. He gave a talk a little while back about activism towards the church, ATC that he called it, and he basically said, it's of the devil, it's terrible, it's wrong, activism's not okay, there's no such thing as loyal opposition. You can raise concerns, but you can't, get all het up about it. Just stick to your lane, kind of stuff.
And if we don't listen, just pipe down. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this talk, he really went off on one about how, well, just play the tape and I'll explain it.
The doctrine of Christ empowers those who are struggling or feel they don't belong in the church, because it helps them, as Elder D. Todd Christofferson stated, affirm Jesus Christ died for me and loves me. Parents, if your child struggles with a gospel principle or prophetic teaching, please resist any type of evil speaking or activism toward the church or its leaders. These lesser secular approaches are beneath you and can be lethal to the long-term faithfulness of your child. It speaks so well of you that you would protect or advocate for your precious child, or show signs of solidarity with him or her. But my wife Jane and I know from personal experience that teaching your beloved child why we all desperately need Jesus Christ and how to apply his joyful doctrine is what will strengthen and heal him or her. Let us turn them to Jesus, who is their true advocate with the Father. The Apostle John taught, "Whosoever abideth in the doctrine of Christ hath both the Father and the Son." He then warns us to beware, quote, "If there come any unto you and bring not this doctrine," close quote.
Gerardo, you go first.
Yeah, kind of. Well, it's just really, it's almost like he took a quote from that talk that we reviewed a while ago, and then, he brought a couple paragraphs to this talk.
It's almost like that talk got him his general authority status, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I was going to say. It reminds me to what Ezra Taft Benson did before he knew he was going to become the prophet. He started campaigning for this idea of the fundamentals of following the prophet, and telling people, you don't criticize the leader. The prophet is the most important one that you need to pay attention to, and don't listen to past prophets because the current one is the most important. Benson, we've known that Benson was doing this because he knew he was gonna become the prophet really soon, and I see Elder Corbitt doing a very similar thing here.
Touche. Thanks, Gerardo. My what bothers me the most is I'll say the oldest of the four of us here by a long way. And I've seen the church for 5 decades, more than 5 decades. And I've watched to see what leads to change in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I lived through the 70s. I lived through the 80s. I watched the September 6th get excommunicated. I watched no change throughout the 80s and 90s. And it literally wasn't until the internet came online, and then blogs, and then podcasts, and then the CES letter, and then YouTube and TikTok. It's been the only thing that leads to positive change in the church is the very thing that Corbitt is decrying, which is activism. Whether it's people on the internet calling for historical transparency, whether it's the ordained women movement calling for more equity and less misogyny and a greater status for women. Polygamy was only the result of protests and even legal actions against the Mormon Church. We all know that the civil rights movement and the protests of Stanford University and the University of Wyoming and many NCAA athletic teams wearing black wristbands, refusing to play BYU in sports events, negative national coverage that led to the changes in the priesthood policy. And of course, what led to the temple changes that we're all experiencing over the past few decades? It was the Godmakers movie made by evangelical Christians and the Godmakers book that came out later, and all the ways the evangelical Christians have criticized the church and its doctrine. And so Corbitt, of all people, not only because he's an African American who has benefited from activism broadly within the United States, is the last person up there in general conference that should be decrying and criticizing and denouncing activism. He and all the other people on that stand should know more than anyone what it is that truly leads to positive change within the Mormon Church. And it's criticism, it's bad PR, it's activism, and specifically internet activism that results in all the positive change. And so that, for me, was one of the most outrageous moments, along with the auditing statement saying there's nothing to see here. These are not the droids you're looking for. Samantha.
That was fire, John.
I'm trying to keep up with you, Samantha.
I think this is a classic example of how high control groups co-opt concepts like love, repackage them into this weird, twisted version of love that is actually completely removed of what love actually is. Because again, love is turning towards suffering. It's being willing to challenge your preconceived notions. It's being often willing to challenge authority even when it's uncomfortable. Things like that, I feel like, are all part of creating a more loving world, both inwardly and outwardly. And he's essentially saying, if you're the mother of a gay child and your intuition is telling you to stand up for your son, let's say, in certain ways, and speak up about the harmful rhetoric the church has perpetuated that has caused, many other gay people to end their lives and things like that. He's basically saying, like, crush all that. What it means to be loving is to follow our organization. If you have any kind of instinct as a parent to, go against what we say, us, the multi-billion-dollar organization that you pay 10% of your income towards, if you have any instincts that are different from what we're teaching you, shut those off, distrust them. Essentially, it's like, this isn't love. This is a talk designed to protect the multi-billion-dollar system that he is a figurehead for. But it's like, this is my issue with people like Nelson saying, be kind, be loving. It's like, well, this is what their understanding of love is informed by. This, we see people be homophobic all the time because they think the most loving thing you can do is teach God's truth about gay people, which is that it's wrong and it's a sin and you're choosing to be wicked. You know what I mean? So this is exactly like a prime example of why I take issue with just these wishy-washy statements about being more loving, being more kind, because like this is what it's backed up by. This is what love looks like within Mormonism, which is the saddest thing about high control groups, is because they take these like beautiful fundamental parts of the human experience, they rob you of them, then they sell you back this artificial version, which is deeply harmful a lot of the time. And that's what's happening there.
Beautiful. And Samantha, a really important question has been asked. New Richard Jones wants to know, what does your sweater mean?
That's a jumper, Sam.
Do
to
you
translate.
want to educate him of what it's actually called that you're wearing?
It is a jumper, yeah. You know, I think it can mean whatever you want it to mean. That's kind of the beauty of it. But to me, it's a tranquil lake next to a pond, a road going somewhere. Where do you want it to go? You know.
Thanks. That was beautiful, Samantha. And I think you win the award for the best commentary of this episode. Mama C writes, hit the like, everyone. It helps Mormon Stories so much. We agree. Please give us super chat donations if you can. Please subscribe to Mormon Stories and Zelf on the Shelf and Nemo the Mormon. And also, please share this with friends and like all the likes. That's super helpful. So what I think is most beautiful about this review of General Conference is it's going to last almost exactly the number of hours as a General Conference session, with 2 hours, because we're at 1:55. Nemo, let's bring it back to you, because you were the producer of this one. Any final thoughts or summations you want to share about General Conference and your review of it?
I think I can't believe this is bragging rights. As someone that has watched all 10 hours of conference, I can say that it is 90% filler, 10% horror. You've got so much in there that is just word soup, word salad, just designed. They use key phrases that make you think of Mormon things, and they say the same old tropes and the same old tired things. And then either Dan Late Jokes makes an effort to say nothing that could be offensive to anyone by literally just quoting Jesus. No one can get mad at him. I'll find a way to get mad at him still, but like generally no one can get mad at him. Or you get people who have benefited from activism by being able to have the priesthood post-1978 saying activism is bad, don't do it. And if you feel inclined to side with your children, don't, because they need healing and Jesus will advocate for them. Even though I claim to represent Jesus, and I'm certainly not advocating for your children that are struggling with these issues. So really, who is? Because you're not allowed to, I won't, and Jesus isn't going to intervene directly, is he? So who's actually advocating for your children? No one. And that's the problem with things like that. So I'll end my rant there. Thank you very much for letting me put this together. I clearly love conference a lot. And I would like to make this a tradition, because I think between my halftime shows and this, there's no excuse for people to not know what's going on in the world of Mormonism every 6 months.
I love it. Really quickly, I'll share a couple comments. Flo M writes, hats off to you, Nemo. Can't subject myself to that abuse for so long. I think Samantha dubbed it Nemo's Gethsemane. Is that right? Is that blasphemous? Nemo watching all sessions of General Conferences, Nemo's Gethsemane. I'm gonna do a self-gratifying quote. Lauren writes, I appreciate John saying positive things about the church. I don't want to hear everything one-sided from either direction, either positive or negative. Thank you very much. No, I'm just kidding. You guys are awesome. And then my dear friend, Allison, you know, you're the best. Allison writes, appreciate the people that watched it, so we didn't have to. So triggering for me, for sure. Shout out to you, Allison. Gerardo, you were going to share some comments.
Yeah, just my final comments.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought this was this conference was relatively benign as far as, you know, rhetoric that we've heard before in the past. It took Dan Late Jokes to literally quote Jesus his whole talk to get a benign General Conference session. And yeah, so I'm glad we did it. I thought everyone's thoughts were great, and my thoughts are, you know, we should probably do better at being kind to other people and people who disagree with us. and maybe we'll be examples to other Mormons on that.
Gerardo, one of the ironies about Nelson's peace talk, to your point, Samantha, is that for at least the past couple decades, you could probably say for the past 4 or 5 decades, those of us who really watched General Conference with the critical eye always thought of conference as the weekend that sends people to the emergency rooms. Like at some points, especially during the Prop 8 and the aftermath, whether it's Boyd K. Packer's talks or Oakes's homophobic talks or an occasional Holland talk that's super offensive, literally there was a body count that would come out of each General Conference because of outrageously horrid things said. Gerardo, in your opinion, did they avoid that for the most part this time, and at least avoid kind of the types of talks that would send people to the emergency room? Do you think that was a silver lining?
Yeah, I mean that's why I said the word benign, but I can't speak for everybody. Right. People go through different situations in lives and things that you are taught to revere this man as, mouth speaks of God. So sometimes they're not very careful to what they say. So there might be things that we didn't highlight that could have affected other people. But in my opinion, relatively benign.
Yeah. So more Jesus, more peace, and continue the trend of less inflammatory, hateful, life-ending statements would be nice.
Just couple it with apologies and they'll be golden.
Yeah, some apologies would be super nice.
That's all they need to throw in.
Samantha.
I don't think, I know what you're saying, but I just don't think we should minimize the fact that this is a high control group, and so much there was a bit more kindness and Jesus and less overtly hateful rhetoric this conference, but we also heard a lot of talks by leaders saying, don't think for yourself, just follow us, ignore your own intuition, remain disconnected from yourself. And that is not a small harm of Mormonism. That's if in a way, the biggest harm of all, right, is encouraging people to distrust themselves and to use these thought control strategies and to make them psychologically dependent on this high control group. And so, as much as there's these positives, to me, it's still just not that different, because it still was encouraging people to be disconnected from themselves, and that is hugely harmful. And it was still massively encouraging psychological dependency and just reinforcing these really damaging ideas that are authoritarian. And also all the bigoted stuff in the past, a lot of those leaders are still alive. Almost every person on that stand has said a bunch of bigoted stuff that still exists, is still sold at Deseret Book, is still on LDS.org. It's still informing the way that people are. They're not dead yet. I guess when they're dead, then it will be null and void. But until then, when there's no apologies for that or reckoning with that, it's it's still passively endorsing all of those messages too. But it's just well, our money's dipping maybe, and our PR, we got to keep our PR up. We're going on peace press, it just feels again hard for me to be too celebratory, because such an enormous damage done by Mormonism is the fact that it's a high control group and that people are psychologically dependent on it, and it's authoritarian and all the stuff I've already said 4 times.
Beautiful. Well, I think we should end by sharing a few final comments. Andrea Dorsey writes, thank you, Samantha, for speaking so loud and proud. I agree with all your comments. Thanks, Andrea. JP writes, if the General Conference sends people to the emergency room, maybe they should put the suicide hotline on screen over their bumper music. Sheesh. William Charles writes, love Gerardo. I love that. We do too. Cindy Bill Cash Jackman writes, as a lifetime Quaker, I've been laughing the whole time because we act so much the same. That surprises me. I thought the Quakers would be an order of magnitude better than the Mormon Church, but apparently not. Mama C writes, love this channel so much. I'm fairly new and very late to the live, but I'll go back and watch from the beginning. Much love to the panel. John and the chat love one another. Maggie May also says, love Gerardo. And so that Nemo doesn't feel left out, Kat Smith writes, Nemo You have been a great addition to the Mormon Truth Brigade. And then Joyce writes, out of curiosity, John, why do you wear a hat while broadcasting? Thanks for calling me out, Joyce. The truth is, I've tried to make a New Year's resolution and not wear a hat because so many people don't like it. I've been running since like 6 a.m. this morning, meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. I didn't have to, and I just recorded something with Cara Burrell before this one. I literally didn't have time to go home and shower today, but I apologize because my best self wouldn't be wearing a baseball cap on Mormon Stories podcast. And then we'll show one more.
It's the ponytail of men. I don't think you should apologize for it.
Yeah. Show us your ponytail, Samantha. You got one flying.
No.
Proud. Mary Jepson writes, you got it, Sam. Just what needs to be said. Thank you. Gerardo.
Oh, I wanted to mention, so I discovered a few hours ago that Hulu in the US, Disney Plus in Spanish speaking countries released I don't know if it's should be called a documentary, but it's a show where they have Pope Francis from the Catholic Church speaking to a group of young adults. And one of them is like an evangelical, one of them is a non-binary, and they're challenging him on topics of abortion, of LGBT, of pedophilia in the Catholic Church, and they press him. And the trailer is pretty impactful. I haven't watched it yet, but those are the types of things that I feel like the Mormon Church should be looking at.
So what you're saying is in 20 years, we can expect the same types of movies from the Mormon Church?
Hopefully. I mean, the trailer looked amazing. I read an article about it.
Yeah.
Just, one of the most recognized religious leaders in the world confronting youth who are not seeing the same as he does, and, like answering their questions. Really, really.
You can
really
count.
cool.
I said it here. Within 20 to 30 years, you're going to see the church produce a similar movie.
I think that would be awesome.
Maven can include that in the show notes as well. And also, Mama C writes, "Thank you for all you do, and everyone at Mormon Stories. Thanks for the super chat. Thanks to everyone who donated to us through the super chat feature, or who subscribe to our channels, or who like or comment. All of that helps the algorithms." I want to thank Nemo. Thank you so much. And freaking Nemo, it's like 3 a.m. there in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
I don't want to break Nemo. So Nemo, we've got to find a better way to do these sessions.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but Nemo, thank you so much for joining us and for organizing all these clips and for all you do. Your channel, I don't know. I hope you saw this, Nemo. There's a whole Reddit thread basically saying Nemo's amazing. Why doesn't Nemo get more support? You saw that, right, Nemo?
Yeah, someone sent it to me. There's one person who was like, he makes great content, but I don't subscribe because he comes across as a bit of an ass and pretentious. I'd just like them to know that I would just like to say thank you for speaking my love language. I feel seen and heard.
Yeah,
I am a pretentious ass. I'm British.
Yeah.
Like they've seen me for who I really am. So thanks for that. Yeah.
No, but all seriousness, Nemo, thanks for staying up. Thanks for
pleasure.
And thanks for all you do to on your side of the pond and beyond to make a big difference. Thanks, Nemo.
Yep, pleasure.
Go get some sleep, all right?
I will do.
All right. And Samantha, check out Samantha Shelley coaching.com if you want support in healing and growth beyond whatever situation you're emerging from. And check out Zelf on the Shelf and subscribe to them. I plug so you don't have to, Samantha.
Thank you, John.
Anything else?
No.
All right. And check out GerardoSumano.com. Is that? No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't exist.
No.
But Gerardo,
I'm
you're amazing.
buying that domain.
It does exist.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, Gerardo, you help make Mormon Stories exist. So thanks for being my right-hand man and all you do behind the scenes and in front of the camera to keep us alive and thriving.
Thank you, John.
And thanks for your wisdom. People love your comments. And
thanks to Maven, who's in the background.
Yeah, Maven. And I was going to shout out Maven. Thanks for doing the moderations and the time codes in the show notes and all you do, both for us and for Mormonism Live. Maven, you're the best. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. And by the way, not only did we go the length of an entire general conference session, we went 9 minutes beyond the 2 hours of a normal general conference session. Thanks to everyone who commented today. Thanks to everyone who donates to the Open Stories Foundation. Your donations make all this possible. So if you want to see this programming continue, go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. And we promise to keep this content going. And Nemo, we hope this can be a semi-annual tradition. Can you sign up for that, brother?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. We'll see if we can get Samantha even more ranty next time.
We did the last one together as well, didn't
That's
we?
right. Yeah, this
So
is like
the
the
tradition
third
is,
time
yeah,
running.
it's in full swing.
All right.
I like it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Be kind to each other. For real. Love each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.